أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sallam, everybody. I'm so happy to have all of you here tonight to talk about an important topic that impacts all of our lives. And that is the topic of being prepared for college, dealing with student debt, the student debt crisis, and also understanding what our university is looking for. Inshallah, I customized my talk based on the type of audience that's here. So inshallah, I'm going to talk more about a continuous charity, the student debt crisis. If anyone wants me to talk about how to gain admissions into good university or good colleges, I can go into that. And I'll also talk about ways to reduce your college debt as well. So everybody, inshallah, is on the same page and we can all start from there. But inshallah, jumping in. The student debt crisis, we all know, is a major crisis impacting all people in the United States today. The student debt crisis right now is at $1.7 trillion. That's the largest debt that Americans hold after their mortgages. It's higher than credit card debt, it's higher than car loans. The student debt crisis is the single greatest debt that Americans have outside of just owning their homes. And of course, over 45 million Americans have to borrow in order to afford to get their kids through college by taking on interest-bearing loans. In 2021, the average debt was $38,000, and that's for undergraduate. $38,000 for undergraduate, and every year the cost of higher education is getting more and more and more expensive. If you have young children, by the time they grow up, the cost of education is going to rapidly increase as well. So what do we do as a community? How do we deal with this crisis that's happening across our country and across our nation? The reality is, my brothers and sisters, the student debt crisis is having a huge impact, especially on young Muslims. The average young Muslim, if you can think about it, once they're in high school, they go to college, let's say they get $38,000 of debt for them and their spouse. After they graduate college, many of us want our children to get married. They're trying to get married while having student debt, and then once they get married, that becomes another expense. Having children becomes another major expense. Buying a house is another major expense. And that's exactly how the capitalist system is designed. It's designed to give an outward appearance that you have wealth, that you have financial stability. But in reality, if you get sick and you can't pay off your mortgage and you can't pay off your debt, then basically you're a few home mortgage payments away from being homeless on the street. And what this is doing is that it's having a huge impact on young Muslims. Many young Muslims are delaying life milestones. They're delaying getting married because they don't want to be saddled with so much debt. It's also creating crisis in the family. We all know that the divorce rate, even amongst Muslims, is increasing. The number one factor that causes divorce are financial disputes between the husband and the spouse. And the debt that they have from their student times, it has an impact on that as well. We also see a phenomenon of Muslims dropping out of colleges. Not many, but there's a growing trend of Muslims dropping out of college after a few years because A, they don't see the value of what they're studying, or that the amount of debt that they have to take in order to graduate becomes too high. Some Muslims, especially young Muslims, we'll talk about this in a second, they don't really know what they want to study. And because they don't know what they want to study, they go to school, they go to college for 1 year or 2 years, and then after that, they then change their majors, change their degrees, spend longer in their universities, and it becomes a major problem. Last but not least, this entire crisis is sucking the money out of the Muslim community. It is sucking the barakah out of our community. So much so that the reason we can't, as I mentioned during my khutbah, we can't build a bigger masjid, we can't fund our schools, we can't fund these projects overseas, is because all of us have material wealth. From the outside looking in, it looks like we have a house, a car, a family, everything is mashallah tabarakallah. However, it's built on debt that has interest. And people spend decades trying to pay off their debt, and they never become debt-free, unfortunately. Of course, as this crisis is happening, we also want, as I mentioned in the khutbah, to be the nation of Iqra Bismi Rabbika Alladhi Khalaq. We want to become the nation of reading, the nation of the pen. We want to become a nation in which we promote and encourage higher education, but we do so in a responsible manner and do it in a manner that's actually going to help a lot of these students pursue their higher education, pursue college. So how do we balance these two areas? How do we make sure that our kids are getting educated, going to the best colleges and universities, getting the best degrees, but also finding ways outside of taking on debt? A part of it is knowledge that I'll talk about later today, and a part of it is also creating a system and a tool that Muslims can tap into in order to pay for their colleges and their education. So I want to talk a little about myself and A Continuous Charity. Alhamdulillah, A Continuous Charity is a non-profit 501c3 charity that started 10 years ago. 10 years ago, let me bring you back to that time. I was in law school at that time. I then had my very religious phase, my super Salafi phase. Everybody goes through a religious phase, especially when they're young and college students, right? And I decided, listen, I'm not going to take on any more debt. I'm not going to deal with this capitalist riba system. I'm going to give up out of law school. And I left law school. Alhamdulillah, at that same time, I had a good friend of mine named Dr. Atar Haq. And Dr. Atar Haq, mashallah, he's from a very wealthy family. He's a doctor, his mom is a doctor, his dad's a doctor, his brothers are physicians. In fact, if you go to his house, even his pet fish and his pet iguana, they're all physicians, mashallah tabarakallah, right? They're from that type of family. So what Dr. Atar would do is he would be the guy that come every day for Fajr Salah. He'd meet the other Muslims in the row, and he went to a masjid like this, right? That was next to the university. So at that masjid, he would meet students, international students, and others who just couldn't afford their next semester of tuition, who just were running out of money to live, to get food, to buy books, and to survive, and they just didn't have a way around it. Some of these students couldn't even take on increasing debt, or because of their religion, they didn't want to take on any more debt as well. So what Dr. Atar would do is he would use his own money, aka his father's money. MashaAllah, his father was paying all of his bills at that time. Those of you who are fathers and your kids are teenagers or in college, you know what's that like. You've got these, grown-up people that are basically like, taking all your money, mashallah. But he would use his father's money and loan it to these students. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, whatever it is. And Dr. Atar, mashallah, he's kind of crazy, right? So every month he would then take out his phone and call the people like, "Ya akhi, where's my money? Yeah, where's my money? I'm going to see you at the masjid. You better have it. You better have it by Fajr, subhanAllah," right? So he would call the people up and let them know that, they owed him money. And imagine doing that for 5 or 10 people every month. You're calling these people up, asking them for money. This is before Zelle. This is before online payments. How are they going to pay you, right? So it became a nightmare. So he called me, and at that time, alhamdulillah, I was working with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. I've been the director of CARE in St. Louis, Missouri for 7 years, and I was the director of CARE in Texas for 3 years. So I have 10 years of experience working in civil rights and legal in a lot of these disputes that happen as well. So because of my legal background, I said, listen, I love your idea. Let's create a nonprofit. Let's create a charity that does what you're doing as an individual, but institutionalizes it. And alhamdulillah, 10 years ago, we launched A Continuous Charity Foundation, and we systemized this process. Alhamdulillah, as I mentioned in the khutbah, that first year we raised about $60,000 and helped about 4 or 5 students. One of the students that we helped, amazing young man. Unfortunately, his father passed away when he was 13 years old, and he was living in Flint, Michigan. His father passed away at 13 years old. So at 14, he started getting a job at McDonald's and 2 or 3 fast food stores. So he would go to school in the day, he would work in the evenings, every single day to provide for his family. When he started, mashallah, this kid was very smart. He got accepted into engineering school, one of the best engineering schools in the city of Detroit. At that time, he needed, after scholarships were done, after everything was done, you still have a pitfall, about $8,000 a semester. So Atar Haq, mashallah, this student was the first student that we were able to help and provide that. And alhamdulillah, 3 years later, he's able to graduate. Now he's an engineer. And mashallah, we went back to him, and mashallah, he's now donating to our cause. But as I mentioned in the khutbah, as we travel around the country and we talk to people about this charity, we would have a lot of skeptical people. We would say, number one, what is $60,000 going to do? The student debt crisis is too big. It's not going to make an impact. But alhamdulillah, now 10 years later, we have been able to make major impact. All these numbers are a little bit old, just because we did our most recent loan cycle just on June of this year. So these numbers are a few months old. But ultimately, we've been able to help over 500 students all across the United States. We help students who are studying English to medicine, engineering to Islamic studies, whatever it is. We've been able to help over 500 Muslim students all across the United States. We've been able to loan over $6 million. This year, we were able to give out $1.3 million in interest-free loans, alhamdulillah. And out of the money we've been able to loan out, we've been able to get about $2.8 million of that has been repaid to us. So about half of the money we've loaned has now been repaid to us through our program, alhamdulillah. And the main number that I want you guys to memorize here is this bottom number, that we've been able to save the Muslim community about $3.6 million of debt, of riba, that they would have paid if they would have just taken out conventional 15, 20, 25, 30-year loans. So this is one of the main issues that we're trying to tackle. We're not just trying to provide educational loans to educate our students. That's a big part of it. But riba is a major sin. It is a sin that we have to get rid of within our community, and we are adamant at trying to combat riba at every stage as possible. That's a big component of the work that we do. Of course, let me introduce myself. My name is Faizan Syed. I'm currently the Chapter and Community Development Manager with A Continuous Charity. I'm also the co-founder of A Continuous Charity. I founded this charity, mashallah, tabarakallah, 10 years ago. Then I took a trip with CARE for 10 years, and now I left CARE, mashallah, and now I'm back with A Continuous Charity as well. As I mentioned, I used to be the director of CARE in Missouri and in Texas. I did that for 10 years. Now, alhamdulillah, I do nonprofit consulting and different type of management projects. I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. I get to work with some of the big Islamic centers, some of the big organizations there. My whole focus is how do you make your organization nonprofit as big as possible and as impactful as possible, inshallah. At A Continuous Charity, we believe that our mission is to promote the spiritual and intellectual development of Muslims in America by providing interest-free loans for higher education. And our vision is by doing this, we hope to bring about a generation of graduates that will have strong Muslim identity and be well-versed in their fields, using both for the benefit of mankind. So let's talk about how A Continuous Charity works. A Continuous Charity is not a bank. We are not a for-profit company. There is no interesting contract that we say we're interest-free, but yet actually you're still paying more than what you took out. It's none of that. We are a non-profit charity. And being a non-profit charity, what we do is we go into the Muslim community. We have, mashallah, tabarakallah, amazing donors. These donors will then give us money. They get a tax deduction by giving us these donations. And what we do is we pool all that money across the country into our national A Continuous Charity Educational Fund. Once it's in that fund, we then have students apply for these loans online. I'll talk about the application process in a second. They apply for the loans. We review the applicants. We then award loans. Like I said, this year we've been able to give out over $1.2 or $1.3 million this year. And then we loan to those students. We don't give the money to the students directly in most cases. Rather, we give the money to their loan holders, the university, the federal grant. Why? Because, mashallah, students are students. You don't know. Maybe they might use it for their debt. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're the sister and they're trying to get married. Who knows, right? I'm joking. But either way, the idea is we will loan that money directly to the university as an institution. We then customize our repayment process. So we'll work with the students to figure out how they can repay. And then as those students pay back their loan, it goes back into this educational fund. And we then recycle that money every single year again and again. And that's why it is a sadaqah jariyah, a continuous charity. The money that people put into this educational fund 10 years ago is still being recycled to this very day. Obviously, today, can we help every student in America? Obviously not. The amount of money that you need is too high. But we are like Ibrahim alayhi salam. If you remember the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ishmael, Ibrahim alayhi salam was told to go into the middle of the desert and build the Kaaba. Now you have to understand that that's a very odd thing to do. Imagine you're in the middle of the desert in the city of Makkah, but at that time there's literally nobody there. And you've got this older man and his son building a building. Okay, that's odd enough. And then Allah tells Ibrahim to stand up and invite humanity to worship at the Kaaba. So Ibrahim alayhi salam stands up, goes on a high place, and basically calls who? Nobody, because nobody else is there, to come and worship at his house. If you were to just use logic and reasoning, you would say this is a crazy situation. This is a total waste of time, wasting their effort. Nothing's going to get accomplished. Yet today, the Kaaba is the most visited house in the entire world. Similar with A Continuous Charity. In the first few years, we're obviously not going to be able to help everybody out there. But the way our system works is that every year our pool of funds gets larger and larger. Mashallah, there's a lot of generous people in the community. The students pay back their loans as well. And through that dual income, we then loan it to another student, and another student, so on and so forth. So whether it's in 50 years, 100 years, 300 years, whatever the timeline is, whatever Allah decides, eventually this is going to get large enough to eventually help everybody that's out there. One of a piece of Islamic history that many Muslims don't understand is when the colonial powers came into Muslim lands, there was no major invasion, right? The Europeans didn't invade all of Muslim countries in 1 year or something like that. What they first did is that they first targeted the waqf systems. The Islamic system has been built on waqfs that have been endowed for hundreds of years, literally. They defunded those waqfs, they nationalized it, and that is the way that they're able to undermine the Islamic institutions all across the Muslim world. So we are here to try to rebuild it using that prophetic process, and it's that simple. It is a very simple concept, a very simple idea. I'm sure you're wondering, okay, how do I apply for this loan? I have a son, I have a daughter, I have a friend, I have an uncle, somebody who needs these loans. So how do you apply? It's very simple. Number one, you don't call me. You don't ask Brother Faizan, brother, can I get your help, brother? I need it. But bro, I can't help you, right? I can't help you. We run this institution like an American institution. You cannot talk to me. I can't help you at all. Rather, we make it fair for everybody. All you have to do is go to our website, January the 1st to March the 31st, and fill out our online application form. It's very fair for everybody. Whether you know me, you know our board president, whatever, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. You go on our website and you apply online. What are the criteria that we look at? We look at 5 basic criteria. Number 1, financial need. Do you actually need this loan? Or is your father a doctor, your mother's a doctor, your brother, your sister, and your goldfish and your cat and dog, they're all physicians. If all of them are physicians, then yeah, maybe you're very smart and you deserve a loan, but you really don't need it. There are other students who are in more financial need than you are, so we're going to target them. Number 2, merit. Are you doing well in school? Are you getting good grades? If the answer is yes, then mashallah, you get high points in that category. And if the answer is no, then we would prefer to give the loans to students who are doing better in school than those who are doing worse. Number 3, this is where we become unique. Islamic scholarship. Islamic scholarship does not mean you have a big beard, mashallah, your pants are above the ankle and you use miswak. If you do that, mashallah, may Allah bless you. But Islamic scholarship means, do you take this deen seriously? Are you trying to be a better Muslim? Do you go to the halakas at the masjid? Do you watch YouTube videos? Are you trying to practice your tajweed and Quran? If the answer is yes, then mashallah, tabarakallah, you will get extra point for that, because we want to invest first and foremost in those Muslims who are investing in the Muslim community. That is our primary target initially. We want to help those Muslim students who are involved in trying to be better Muslims that understand the evils of riba, but also they want to be the best Muslim they can be. Number 4, community activism. It's not enough to just learn, but you also have to take action. So community activism just means that, are you active in the Muslim community? Are you part of the MSA? Are you part of volunteering at the masjid? Are you part of the food pantry at the masjid? Whatever it is, we want to see that you're actively involved in the Muslim community, because those students are more likely to pay back their loans, and those students are inshallah going to live a life that is constantly trying to give back to the Muslim community. The last one is geography. Geography simply means that if we raise, let's say, $10,000 at the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh, then we believe that that money should be used for students that go to the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh, right? I cannot solve the student debt crisis. You cannot solve the student debt crisis. But we all are part of communities. We can raise money locally. We can create a local fund and use that fund to help local students. The students pay back into their local fund, and after 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you're now able to help multiple students with this challenge. Who do we give these loans to? Well, we give it to basically anybody who's studying in a university. Undergraduates, if you're about to start college and you're in your first 4 years, you can get a loan. Graduate school for master's program, you can get a loan. If you're studying for PhD or medicine or law, you can get a loan. And also we provide these loans to students who need to refinance, meaning that mashallah tabarakallah, you've gone to college, you have your degree, you're working, but you also have like $50,000 worth of debt. So what we'll do is we'll provide a loan to offset that cost, either pay all of the debt or part of it, and then you just pay us back what you're already paying the bank. So these are the different categories that we provide these loans to. Ultimately, my brothers and sisters, it is our goal for us as a community to change the way we think about higher education from me to we, rather than saying, how am I going to get my children educated? Because if you do that, you're not going to be successful. None of us are going to be successful. All of us are going to have to take our student debt. There's no way around it. Rather, if we say, how are we going to get our kids educated? How are we going to pool our money to make sure that all of our kids are able to go to college without taking on riba? Then that's when you start seeing these major changes happening and occurring. And of course, our ultimate goal is in the next 10, 15 years to raise $100 million. That's our goal right now. We're at 6-7 million right now, actually over 6 million now. And now we have a team in place, and we're now actively fundraising, finding donors and investors across the country. And once our goal is to get to $100 million, I think that will be a large enough pot of funds that can really help almost all Muslim students who are deserving in these criteria. So this is our ultimate goal, inshallah, and that's where we want to take it. I know some people ask questions such as, do we give loans to international students? We do give loans to some international students, but it depends. So those international students, they have to show that they're going to be able to stay and work in the United States. That's the criteria that we look at. Because if you're an international student and you go back to Pakistan, Mauritania, Iraq, whatever it is, there's no way for us to enforce our contract with that student. And that means that the likelihood of us getting paid back is diminished. However, there are some international students who are able to come here, reside in the US, and also get a job here as well. We've had several students that have gone through this process. If you're that type of international student, then yes, inshallah, we can provide for you a loan as well, inshallah ta'ala. Another criteria that I want to talk about is that we have many, many students who come to us asking for these loans. And at the end of the day, brothers and sisters, we are not a bank. We don't go and call the federal government and ask them to basically print money, give it to us, and then we loan it out and things like that. We don't have that capacity. All the money we have is just from donations, investments, and things of that nature, and that's it. So if we aren't able to provide certain students loans, it's not because we don't like you, it's not because you're from the wrong country or what. It's none of that. It's simply because we just don't have enough funds. This is a step in the right direction. It is a process to try to address this issue and crisis, but that's just what it is. It's a step in that direction. And it's something that we are dedicated for, we're passionate about. I think we're going to get to 100 million in the next 10, 15 years, but it's a work in process. It requires all of us to participate and invest and be a part of it as well, inshallah. With that, I'm going to pause for a little bit, because I know that there are a few high school students here, but I think many of the students are college or adults. So let me pause here and see, are there any questions that people have about a continuous charity, our student process, or anything of that nature? I'll answer those. And then after that, I'm going to give a talk that's mainly for high school students and parents. It's going to be talking about how to get into colleges, especially prestigious universities. And the second talk is how to reduce your college debt. It's going to give advice on how to lower your debt. I have a slide for scholarships and things like that. Before I do that, let me pause and see, are there any questions or thoughts before I continue? Yes, my brother. Chris or Brother Bill, can you pass these out to everybody who's here? And give everybody a pen and one of these and my business card. Yes, brother, I'm sorry.
You had mentioned that you get the money from donations and you can clarify on the investment from.
Yeah. So alhamdulillah, since day one, we put aside a portion of our funds into our endowment. So an endowment is, we have it with amount of mutual funds. Basically, every donation we get, we put it into there. And then as that endowment raises funds, we then also use some of that for these loans, some of that for others. We have some donors who donate large amounts of money, like $100,000 sometimes. So some of them, they want it to go to students, but then also they want part of that to go to the endowment. And then the money that the endowment makes goes into their pot for loans, inshallah. So that's what I mean by the investments that we have. Yes, sister. That's a great question. So the sister asked, what is the criteria for us to determine which students we give the loans to, whether they have money and whatnot. So what we do is, alhamdulillah, we have our online application cycle. I'm actually just going to share my screen for a little bit so you guys can see it as well. So this is our website right here. It's called accceducate.org, and it has all the information that you need. So for example, you can learn about A Continuous Charity. You have some more statistics and numbers. In order to apply, you just click on this button here that says apply. Has the entire process on how to apply, what we look at, what the categories are, minimum, maximum number of loans, mashallah, all this type of information and whatnot as well. So once somebody applies online, we then have a committee of Muslims from all around the country, from different ethnicities and backgrounds, and they create what's called the Application Review Committee. Those committees are the one that look at all of our applicants, and they're the one that determine which of them get the loans and which of them don't. The applicants are randomized, so we don't know who the person is on the application. So then they're just basing it purely on the merit, the need, their Islamic scholarship, their activism, and also their geography. And then that's the ones who make that determination. One of the unique thing about A Continuous Charity is that we believe a lot in one-on-one relationships. What that means is that some people might ask, okay, how much do you loan out to, right? Well, the average student loan that we give right now is about $20,000. Some of them is a lot more. It's like $50,000, $80,000. Some of them is a few $100s, right? So if you average it all out, it gets to about $20,000. And then the average repayment is about 4 years. Some is longer, some is shorter, but around 4 years. And the reason those two numbers are important is because how do we determine how long it'll take for the students to pay us back? Well, we get into a one-on-one interview with the student. We understand their financial situation and need, and then we create a repayment plan that works for that student. Ultimately, what that means is that some students are maybe juniors in college. They have 2 more years. Then after those 2 years, then they can start making payments, while other students can start making payments right away. So what we do is work with them to create a model, create a repayment process and a plan, and then we work off of that. Another question that sometimes people ask me is, what happens if a student can't pay back the loan, right? At the end of the day, in our religion, a loan is a type of sadaqah. It is a type of charity that we're providing for these students. So if a student cannot pay back because of financial hardship or difficulty that they're having, then what we do is we work with the student, we communicate with them, we talk to them. And if it's a financial situation or they lost their job, we will then pause the repayment, or we'll dramatically reduce it to like $20, $30 a month, something like that, until they get back on their feet and then they start making their normal payments, right? So alhamdulillah, we do that. However, what happens if a student can never pay back their loan, right? What happens if a student can never pay back their debt? Well, this has happened to us, subhanAllah. We've had a few students, one in particular who was in a serious car accident, and subhanAllah, may make dua for this brother and his family. He's paralyzed from the neck down, and he'll never recover from that. So in that situation, when this person clearly can never pay back their loan, alhamdulillah, we forgive loans based on those circumstances as well. So sometimes we collect zakat money. We don't, as a charity, you cannot use zakat for loans, right? So we kind of understand this. So whenever somebody gives us zakat, we always try to refund them and say, please don't donate us zakat money. We don't accept it. But then some people just mail us a check zakat, and what do you do? So we put our zakat fund. So in cases where the student cannot pay back at all, the crisis has happened, we'll use those zakat funds to then forgive those loans. The third category of students are those students who can pay back, but they're just lazy, or they just don't want to, or whatever's going on, they're just not contacting us back and not repaying. So again, A Continuous Charity does get into legally binding contracts with these students. We also have co-signers, and we have the same legal rights that a bank or another lender would have in order to go after that person. So we can go after their credit, we can garnish wages, we can go after their taxes, and different things like that to make sure we're being paid back. Well, why is that? Well, because that student who's not paying back is not a victimless crime. There are students waiting for that student to pay back their loans, and then once they get their loan paid back, then that money goes to the next student in line. So we consider this as a type of dhulam, a type of oppression, and we will take action to make sure the students pay back their obligations and their loans. And of course, like I said, we're very open, very communicative. If a student tells us, hey, I have a problem, we'll reduce the rate and reduce the cost. So these are some aspects to consider about a continuous charity. Are there other questions people might have about the charity in general that I can respond to? Yes.
Kind of a technical question, but I'm assuming with the millions that you have, that you keep that in an endowment and pay out with some sort of growth that you get, is that right?
A little bit of both. So we have an endowment, and then we also have an educational fund that's just cash flying around. Yeah, rotating fund.
Okay.
And then we have our operational costs as well. That ultimately our goal is to get our endowment to be at around 8 million, so that way it can take care of all our expenses. So like this presentation, my materials, everything be taken care of by that. ACC is still a startup. We're still trying to build that endowment up, inshallah. But ultimately, that's what we want to get. We want to have the whole charity be endowed, and that way any year people donate, it's only going into providing interest-free loans.
Right. And so my question with that then is, what have you found to invest in that isn't riba based in America?
Yeah, so we we work with Amana Mutual Funds, and Amana Mutual Funds invest primarily in stocks and these things, and we utilize that. We also invest in property and real estate. So that's something that we've had some donors that didn't give us money. They basically give us, real estate and property. So we also utilize that as well. If any of you know any very wealthy real estate agent and they have a huge building they want to donate to ACC, send them my way, inshallah. We'll take care of them, inshallah. Any other question about a continuous charity, the process, or anything like that I can help clarify? Yes, brother.
There's two more for me.
Of course.
Scalability is one. And then two, have you thought about after you get to the 100 million, what does it look like?
Yeah, so scalability right now, we're really in the trenches. We're really trying to call our donors, call contacts, call mass, ICNA, ISNA, call masajids, and trying to get as many of them to participate in a continuous charity as possible. ACC has different programs. For example, we have a legacy fund. So for example, if a donor gives more than $10,000, let's say in their mother's name and their father's name, a loved one's name who passed away, what we'll do is we'll create a fund within a continuous charity with that person's name. And when we loan money to students, we'll say that this money came from this fund, right? When the students pay back their loans, they pay it back into that fund, and then the money is recycled again and again. As a donor, I get a report every year that says, here's the students you've given loans to, here's their stories, here's their background, here's how much they paid. So they get these really nice financial reports. We have another program that's for organizations called a partnership program. So for example, we have masajids, different organizations that give $25,000 or more. And then they basically say, hey, listen, let's say Islamic Center Pittsburgh. We're the Islamic Center Pittsburgh. We have $25,000 in our fund. We want ACC to give this money to these 10 students who, do something within the community. ACC will then service those loans. So we'll basically be like, all right, you 10 students, here's your application, fill it out. Here's your money. Here's the legal process. And then we make sure the students pay back their loans into that fund. And then the masjid is able to say, hey, we now have an educational fund with our masjid or within our charity, within our organization. There's a way to provide additional services as well. A lot of Muslim organizations are doing that across the country. Every year they do an annual fundraiser. They're able to grow their pot. So ultimately, that's how I feel about scalability, is once we can get every masjid, every organization to open up an ACC fund to provide educational loans to their students, their community, that's when I think we'll start seeing major changes happen. When it comes to beyond 100 million, we're looking into other types of debts that Muslims have. So the next debt we're thinking about going into is credit card debt. Many Muslims, for one reason or another, they just get burdened with credit card debt. Once you have maybe $15,000 or $20,000 of credit card debt, you're basically paying $400 or $500 a month just on the interest, especially if it's like a Discover card or one of these other type of cards as well that has high interest on it. So what happens is that Muslim families, especially young couples, will take on a lot of credit card debt. They kind of lose track of their debt. And when that happens, they get into the spiral of debt, right? So that's another area we're looking into, is to start providing credit card loans. So we find Muslims who have high debt, we pay off their credit cards. We have them, basically saying documents that saying that they're going to avoid trying to do that in the future. And that's an area that we're looking into going as well. Ultimately, who knows? One day we might get into business investments, or I provide interest-free commercial loans or others. But those are high dollar amounts, and we probably have to lobby government, the U.S., to then, start using state and federal funds for our work, inshallah. Yes, sister. What? Unfortunately, fortunately, let's start with the good. The good news is a lot of Muslims, every community I go to, everybody says we thought of this. We thought of this. We were to do this and whatnot. But actually getting it up and running and a running functioning charity is very hard, right? There's a lot of back end, a lot of legality, even creating a system to follow up with students and paying them back. There's a lot to it. So unfortunately, I don't know any other organization that does what A Continuous Charity does. There might be some small groups in like specific cities or specific communities that do it for their local community, but nothing on the national level at this stage. Inshallah, I hope that will inspire more. I hope that more Muslim students more organizations will do it. And we have 5, 10, 15 organizations doing it across the country, inshallah. Yes, brother.
So what's the cost for every dollar you get donated
Mm-hmm.
to manage all of our collection?
Yeah.
And calling people?
So in the good old days, it was maybe like 4%, right? 4%, 3%, something very tiny. Why? Because our total funds were like $100,000, very small dollar amounts. So that we had volunteers, we had like a part-time staffer. And if you could look at, I should actually have a graph of this. If you look at the amount of money ACC has had over the years, in the first 5 or 6 years, it was like a few $100,000. And then we made a conscious decision that if we actually want to make a huge dent, we have to hire staff, we have to hire people, we have to really expand. There's only so much you can do with volunteers, there's only so much you can do with part-time people. So in the last 4 years, that's what we did. We started hiring staff, we hired people. So we went from a few $100,000 to now 6 million in just like 3-4 years, right? So because of that, our operational costs have had to increase. We're about 16-17% operational cost right now. And unfortunately, I think that it's a high amount, but I think it's worth doing that because 4% of $100,000 is only going to help so many people. 15, let's say even 20% of 6-7 million is going to help a lot more students. As the fund grows, that percentage will go down, right? As we're able to like raise more funds and whatnot. But it's a strategic risk that it's a strategy we took to hire the staff to have that base level work to work operationally and effectively, and hoping that will bring in the funds to then offset those costs. I have to be as straightforward as possible. So I don't want to be like, oh, our operation costs only 4 or 5%. It's not. It is high right now, but it's high for a reason, and I think we'll be able to overcome it soon, inshallah. Yes, brother.
So once you apply for a loan, as you start accumulating debt, or as soon as you get accepted into it?
We would recommend apply for it as soon as you know you're going to need a loan, right? So for example, are you a senior in high school or what year are you? Junior, mashallah. So this is a hard year for you. This is the year that really matters. Next year is going to be a little easier, but then go from there. Long story short, your senior year, your spring semester, you're going to start getting letters from universities that are going to basically give you offers of costs, of scholarships, of FAFSA loans, and other things like that. Once you calculate it all out, you'll then be like, hey, listen, the university is covering all of my funds, but I'm $6,000 short or $10,000 short. My parents can put in $5,000. Okay, mashallah, I'm now $5,000 short. So once you know that you're short a certain amount, you should go and apply, because the time we give out the loans, our application cycle from January 1st to March the 31st, we then loan students in June. So that way you start getting the money before your college starts in August, right? So that's the type of cycle you want to do it. I would not apply this year because you don't know where you're going, but next year, your senior year, depending on what university you want to go into, you should consider potentially applying for this.
You guys do this with trade schools too, or is it just?
No, we do trade schools, alhamdulillah, plumbing school, all this stuff. We're very open in what you're studying, as long as you're not studying like casino management or like, or things like that, right? But anything else we basically cover, alhamdulillah. Yeah. No, one time I was at a convention, I won't say which convention to not insult them, but there's a brother who stood up and he basically said, so wait, Sheikh, you're telling me it's haram for me to take out an interest-bearing loan to buy my girlfriend a liquor store? And then everybody in the audience was like, what? I were hoping that was a joke, but that guy looked like he's very serious, right? So either way, khair. My brothers and sisters, if there's no other questions, I can go. We have until 8:20. So I actually don't know if I'll have time for the rest of the presentation. But what I'll do, Imam Chris, is I'll send you a video recording of myself. I've been doing it before, and then you can share with others. Would that be okay? Yeah, because this part actually takes like 45 minutes or 50 minutes or so. But basically this portion, what we do is we talk about how to gain college admissions. what are colleges looking for in admissions, and we also break it down by year. So like, what should you do your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior year, your senior year, and how to gain letters, how to gain support, how to apply for FAFSA and scholarships. The one slide that I'll show everybody here is this one. I'm running out of time. Where did that slide go? One for different scholarships you can apply for. Oh, I guess somebody deleted my slide. Okay. But basically we have one slide that has a list of scholarship websites you can apply for. We have a tutorial on how to go online, apply for scholarships, so that way you can get your whole college paid for. Many people, students don't know, there's so many scholarships available in America. If you actively try and you have decent grades and you're active in some capacity, there's a high chance you can get your entire higher education basically covered or paid for. And there's also working programs. There's a lot I can talk about that, inshallah. But I'll send you a video, Imam Chris, send it to the community, and I think that'll be the easiest way. And we're basically running out of time. With that, let me pause. Is there anything that maybe you guys would like for me to cover in this specific topic? Or if not, I can talk a bit more about Aiken's charity, and then we'll break for Isha Salah, inshallah. No? Khair. What?
So it's your call.
Khair. Yeah, I mean, we have 11 minutes. What I can do is, let me just go over this process because you're in high school. So this will be helpful for you. So if any of high school students, I'm just going to go over a short presentation on how to prepare your high school students in order to get accepted into the best university and what to focus on each year. So let's start off. So basically what you want to do is, if you have high school students, their freshman year is when you want to hyper focus on their academics, making sure they do well in school, and you want them to start exploring extracurricular activities, meaning that it doesn't matter what interest they have, whether it's sports, whether it's clubs, whether it's whatever, have them start exploring multiple activities and get involved in these different activities. What colleges really want is they do not want a student who is the president of their sports club and the leader in debate and does music and does this and this and this. That's not what they want. That they know that their parents are trying to get them involved. That's not their interest. What universities are doing, especially now today, is that they create entire classes of people. What that means is that if you are trying to get into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, a very prestigious university, what you need to do is you need to be able to distinguish yourself and go into a niche that you are very unique and you're specialized in. A silly example I give is the clarinet, right? Who here plays the clarinet? Probably nobody, except Squidward from SpongeBob SquarePants, right? But if you play the clarinet and you're very good at the clarinet and you apply for a university and they have a band and they don't have a clarinet player, even though your grades are not that good, even though your activities are not as good, you might get accepted because you fill in that niche that the university is looking for. And that's one of the things that we want to focus on. So your freshman year, you want to focus on academics and start exploring different extracurricular activities. Your sophomore year, you want to be able to maintain academic excellence. You also want to try to take honor classes or AP classes as well. And honor and AP classes are what are going to help you get in to more prestigious universities. Dual enrollment classes, these are classes that you can take that basically are college credits. They're not really going to help you get into prestigious universities. They will help cut the cost of universities. They will help you get credits for the university, but they're not necessarily going to get you into prestigious universities. Both are good, both have their merit, but just to consider the two. This is when you want to start getting deeper in your interests, deeper in the interest that you are passionate about. So your freshman year, you join a bunch of clubs. Your sophomore year, you want to start going away from some of the clubs and choosing those few clubs or few programs or few jobs or whatever it is that you're really passionate about. And that's what you want to focus on. And you want to build depth into those programs. And you want to start doing that your sophomore year. Your sophomore year, you also want to begin test preparation. In case you don't know, the ACT and SAT, these tests are being considered less necessary. Not all universities are looking at them like they used to in the past. However, they still have a huge impact in colleges and the scholarships you can get. ACT and SAT do not measure how smart you are. They do not measure how smart you are. You can have straight A's in school, and if you take the ACT or SAT without preparing, you are going to do poorly. The ACT and the SAT, what they measure is your familiarity with the test. Meaning, how familiar are you with these types of questions, the way that they want you to think about it, the way that you can word it. That's what they test ultimately. So if you want your son or daughter to do well in the ACT, SAT, Everybody can do better by simply becoming familiar with the test. Hire a tutor that'll actually teach you the different skills for each section of the ACT or SAT. The more you practice those sessions, the better you will become. There's also amazing online programs that are out there right now. The more you practice, the more you become familiar, the more hours you put in, you will do better. I can't imagine a scenario where somebody practices and then they do worse. I just can't see that happening. The test does not measure how smart you are. It measures how familiar you are with the test and being able to do the different sections. So start and sophomore year and begin test preparation. Get a tutor, after school program, online program, whatever it is. Do that. It's going to make a huge impact. Junior year is the single most important year for college admissions. Well, why is that? Because your senior year is when you're going to start applying for colleges, your first semester of your senior year. And then the spring semester is when colleges are going to basically give you admission letters. So your senior year is not as, it is important, but it's not as important as your junior year. Your junior year is really how you set yourself apart from all the other competition when you're going to college. So your junior year is when you want to select rigorous courses. That is the year if you want to really push yourself. Junior year is the year to push yourself. Don't worry about senior year. Don't worry about that. Junior year is the year to do it. Take more honor classes, AP classes if you're trying to get into prestigious universities or apply for scholarships. Take dual credits if you want to take the college credits and reduce the number of years you're going to be in college. This is when you want to focus on standardized testing. You want to take the PSAT and the other practice tests and start taking these tests and exams as much as you can. Important. Universities, especially more prestigious universities, they expect you to have letters of recommendation. Now, your English teacher is going to write you a letter of recommendation. Your math teacher is going to write you a letter of recommendation. Your counselor is going to write you a letter of recommendation. That is not going to set you apart. That's their job. That's what they're there to do. What really sets you apart is if you can get a letter of recommendation, preferably from somebody who is in the field of what you want to go in the future. If you want to study medicine, for example, and you want to get into a medical school or medical program, let's say, for example, in Kansas City, they have a 6-year medical program. It combines bachelor's and the medical program into one program. So if you get accepted to medical school at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, you go in, you don't take the MCAT, you don't take any medical program, you go for 6 years, you graduate, you start residency. So in that program, the real way to get in there is you need to get a letter of recommendation from somebody who is a doctor, somebody who is in part of that field. What I recommend my students to do is whatever your study is, whatever you want to get into in the future, find an internship, find a volunteering opportunity in that field, get to know the people who are your seniors, who are doctors, engineers, lawyers, English teachers, artists, whatever you want to do. Find those people, make sure they know you by your first name, and have them write your letter of recommendation. Recently, I had many students that have gone to medical school. Why? Because they got letters from people who donate money to that medical school who are Muslim. MashaAllah, we have a lot of talent in our community. This is not easy. This is difficult, especially for high school students to do. They will not do it unless their parents really push them to do it. But this is how you can get better scholarships and how you can get into universities you might not get into just by your grades alone. Anybody that's applying to Harvard, Yale, they have good grades. That doesn't matter at that point. What matters is your interest being in a niche that nobody else has and having letters of recommendation, also being able to pursue letters as well. Last but not least, you want to pursue leadership in the interest that you have. So if you are part of the debate club your freshman year, then your junior year, you want to become the president of the debate club or the vice president or secretary. Show that you have a passion, that you're interested. Inshallah, I'll end with this in 1 minute, inshallah. Summer before senior year, important time. Summer before your senior year, you want to develop your college list, what university you want to go into, and you want to have a serious conversation with your parents saying, what can we afford? What is worth pursuing and where do I want to go? This is also, that summer is when you want to volunteer and intern at whatever place it is to get those letters of recommendation. If you can do that your junior year, even better, but definitely the summer of your senior year, try to do that and prepare for your application essays. The one advice I can give about application essays is that there is no perfect essay. Universities can tell when you had a professional write your essay. They can tell it. I used to work at my university to do this. In 1 second, I can tell an authentic letter from a letter that is done by a tutor or somebody. These letters that you're writing, Be personal. They want about who you are, what sets you apart, what your interests are. If you can write that passionately in a letter, it will stand out from all the other template letters or the letter that people hired somebody to help them do. Senior year, I'll end with this. Finalize your coursework. Make sure you graduate on time. Complete your college applications. That's when you start applying for scholarships, especially your senior year. You can do it any year. You can also apply for scholarships when you're in college. Many of you students don't know. You can apply for scholarships when you're in college. It's very easy to do. I'll talk about it later. Prepare for your interviews, especially for more elite universities, and evaluate your offers and make your decision. With that, I want to say Jazakallah khair for your time. I know it's time for Isha Salam. Assalamu alaikum. Let me pause the stream. All right. Jazakallah. Yes, sister.